Hey, fight fans, thanks for joining us and welcome to The Weigh-In, the show that spotlights the latest MMA bouts and the topics surrounding the sport. I'm Dorian, Mr. MMA Hernandez, and with me as always, Nathan Tyrone.
And today we're going to bring you our recap and review of this weekend's event, UFC 186, with Johnson Horiguchi at the headline of that.
And folks, if you didn't see this card, you missed out on some great mixed martial arts action. Just to give you an idea, 4 decisions, 3 submissions, 2 TKOs, and 2 out of those decisions, fight of the night candidates. So so let's just even start and tell you how the whole evening went. We're going to start with the prelims fight. Our first fight was Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus David Bulldog McCall. And Mr. MMA has to admit right off the bat, I took an L on this one. I was going for Bulldog. I really thought he had it in his striking to pull it out. And I just don't know maybe he did or maybe he didn't. It just didn't look like the McCall I was expecting. But Olivier Aubin-Mercier, boy, did this man step it up. He made it show that he was not just a wrestler, even though they knew he was going to go to his wrestling game. But he mixed up his striking well, especially with the kicks and the punches, especially those kicks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ultimately pulls out a 3rd round rear naked choke. Way to go, Mercier. Awesome victory. I was well worth taking the L on that one.
Yeah, and I got a donut on that one too, guys, and it wasn't one of those sweet ones. What are you going to say? These are 2 relatively new fighters to the UFC. We tried to give them their due. I mean, I was impressed. And it was a fast fight, and the fight went everywhere. And, McCall, he couldn't pull it out, and so Mercier gets the W for this weekend.
And just remember, McCall did a great job of submission defense because he was in trouble at least 2-3 times during this fight. I think, right? At least 3. And ultimately, like I said, it ended up being in the 3rd round, but Mercier pulled it out with that beautiful rear naked choke.
Right.
All right, on to our next fight. It's going to be Chad the Disciple Laprice versus Brian Bam Bam Barberena. Mr. MMA took it again. I really thought Barberena could have done it, and he almost did. He was starting to come back strong because it looked like Laprice almost gassed. But folks, let me remind you, this like I said, this card was a great card, and this fight right here won fight of the night. Okay, these guys were constantly exchanging. Barberena started to come back, towards the end. But in the end, the Disciple pulled out the unanimous decision victory and showed why he was the winner of the Ultimate Fighter Nations. And now he's got that win streak up to 3. And now that snowball's rolling.
Yeah, one to look out for. Definitely one to look out for. Another donut for your man, Nathan Tyrone, though. I also did not think that this fight was going to end the way it was. Again, 2 young competitors, 2 very similar skill sets. Unfortunately for me, though, Laprice battered Barberena toward the latter part of the fight and walks away this weekend with the W.
And that was another thing. I just thought, even though this was this one fight of the night, there was another candidate that we'll talk to later, but ultimately these guys were throwing leather. They were trying to mix it up as best as they could. It was ultimately a striking match, but in the end, they left their heart and soul in that cage. And like I said, this was a fight it was sure not to miss.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, our next fight was in the women's bantamweight division. It had the number 3, Alexis Davis, versus the number 5, Sarah Kaufman. Mr. MMA had Kaufman on this one, and if you were watching this fight, she was well on her way to at least a decision victory, a dominant unanimous decision victory. But one slip up in the takedown, and it was all she wrote. Yeah. Alexis Davis ends up almost getting a full mount, but ultimately secures an armbar. Kaufman has to unfortunately tap out, and very painfully, unfortunately, because the ref ended up being on the wrong side of it, so he couldn't really see the tap, and ended up having to be a verbal tap. But I was going for Kaufman because I've always seen Alexis Davis get sloppy, especially in her striking. She did tighten it up, and she was trying her best in this fight to hold her own. But Kaufman was getting the best of her on those exchanges. Yeah. So ultimately, this doesn't take anything away from Kaufman. Unfortunately, it just puts her a little step back, especially for almost being a year layoff. But ultimately, great job, Davis. Ultimate fight.
Yeah, I was really happy with Davis. I feel like Davis needed a performance like that, or even a little better one, because as you described her in our preview of the event, you described her as a fighter that likes to give a punch to take a punch, but perhaps takes a little too many. Yeah, that was kind of evident in this fight, that she was leaving herself open in her attempts to strike herself. I'm glad, though, that Alexis Davis was able to pull it out. I think that she needed a win. I think that her devastating loss to Ronda Rousey, that can have detrimental effects to a fighter's career when you lose that quick and that badly. And it seems as though that she's got her head together. She's got the fight game back on, fight face back on. And good for Davis for pulling out the win this weekend.
Great job. All right, and the main event, even though they usually don't refer to it, but our main fight on the prelims card was Patrick the Predator Cote versus Joe Diesel Riggs. Now, I know I had some jokes on this fight, but Riggs showed why the man is 40-15. Okay, him and Cote were definitely trying everything they possibly can to win this match. Some of it looked pretty, some of it didn't. Some of it looked tactical and clinical, and other ones it was just sloppy, a Hail Mary. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. But these guys threw everything at each other and the kitchen sink, but ultimately Cote pulls out the unanimous decision victory, and I had the Predator winning on this one.
Yeah. I'm a donut again, so that's 3 donuts with 1 call up. And what are you going to say? I mean, I think you gave it an apt description between the fighters of the 2 journeymen, and though I felt like Riggs at some point was really trying to work his jiu-jitsu and really trying to do something, and showing some pretty established technique. And then, again, you blink, and then Riggs flopping all over, sloppy escape attempts, just zero control on the ground. And Cote really was able to hit that when he was lowering his hips and hitting the switch. He hit that twice, and he hit it beautifully. Yeah, he hit it beautifully. Yeah. So good for Cote. Cote walks away with the W this weekend.
And now on to the main card, where Mr. MMA blew it up. Hey. Our first fight was in the men's bantamweight division. It starred Yves Tiger Jabouin versus Thomas Tominas Almeida. And all I know is that when I see a fighter that is game and who's hungry out there, and I know no matter what is definitely going to leave his heart and soul in the cage, Almeida is definitely one of those fighters who will do it. And he showed it in beautiful fashion. He sized up Jabouin beautifully and ultimately pulls out a TKO in the first round and earns himself a $50,000 bonus for performance of the night. Way to go, Almeida, for a UFC debut.
Yeah, and if one thing you can say about this card, it was not short on thrilling ends. Just between the knockouts and the submissions, this is the kind of fight. These were the kind of fights, rather, that this fight fan in particular likes. And so I'm walking into the final card having only picked 1 correct. And this is another one, unfortunately. Well, no, actually, I called this one. This is the Almeida one. So I called this one. And both Mr. MMA and Nathan Tyrone, in this case, walk away with a 1-up on their predictions card. Almeida did a fantastic job. And just as we predicted, lightning fast with his hands and got it done early.
Oh, and let me just make that little correction. It's actually his first UFC pay-per-view debut. It wasn't his UFC debut, but his pay-per-view debut. And what a debut that is with a TKO first-round finish.
Absolutely.
And like I said, the extra $50,000 in the pocket.
Yeah, that never hurts.
That never hurts. All right. The next fight on the card was actually at catchweight. At first point, it was supposed to be in the 155-pound division. But, as they always put in that little fine print on these things, card is always subject to change. So it was John the Bull Makdessi versus Shane Campbell. This was Shane Campbell's actual UFC debut. And talk about this was something that my partner and I said that because of Campbell's background, he actually wouldn't have any type of jitters, and he didn't.
No,
he really
he didn't have any jitters.
But he definitely showed where he was somewhat a fish out of water. Yeah. Makdessi showed no fear in this fight, even took a very awkward and semi-traditional boxing stance because ultimately he knew he just needed to catch him with that right combo and he would finish him off, and that's exactly what Makdessi does. Yeah. Pulls out a first-round TKO, and unfortunately now hands Campbell his first loss in his MMA career.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I thought Campbell was going to come in a little better than that. I thought Campbell, having a previous championship experience, would be able to roll that into his experience at the UFC. But we often see fighters that we followed, fighters that with other organizations that are not, prime time, because that's really what the UFC is in terms of mixed martial art. It's the big show. They come in, and I'm not going to say Campbell was awestruck or confused or any of that. He really was, in the fight, he was just outclassed. And Makdessi walks away this weekend with a W.
And to Campbell's defense, he was definitely in there because he got rocked early in the first round. He weathered the storm, but ultimately McDessie ended up catching him again with that nice little right hook and finished it off with strikes.
Yeah.
Way to go, McDessie.
Yeah, good job.
All right. Our next fight on the card was the middleweight division. It had Michael, the Count Bisping, versus CB, the Doberman, Dalloway. Hey, Mr. MMA is human. I had to take an L on this one. I thought that I was going with the younger guy on this one. I should have gone with age and experience, especially when everybody knows Bisping has gone against some world-class grapplers and then manages to stay on his feet. Now, a lot of times we expect these fighters to look like physical specimens, and some of them actually really do. But I think that's why Bisping has the nickname the Count, because don't count him out. He did a great job. He caught a left hook in the beginning of the first round and knocked him to the floor. My partner and I are a little in disagreement about how bad that hit might have been.
Right.
But ultimately, Bisping weathers the storm, pulls it out, and with his great conditioning and cardio, pulls out the unanimous decision victory. I feel bad for Dalloway, but you know what? Taking an L on this fight, it was well worth it. Way to go, Bisping.
Yeah, way to go, both of the fighters, really, for this particular fight.
And this was my other fight of the night candidate.
This one quite easily could have been fight of the night. Did not get the nod. It went to the guys on the prelim card. But I thought Bisping was going to take it, and he did. I thought Bisping was going to be sharper with his hands, and he was. I think that
feet too.
Yeah, his footwork looked great.
Awesome.
I mean, it's nothing new. He's just returning to form. He's been out of form for a little, but his last few fights show that he's returning to form. And I don't know if he'll ever be a real contender, but I know that he's still interested in that. And so good for Bisping on his win, and good luck in his future. See what happens with him.
And no matter what, he'll always at least be that fighter that you'll want to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, our next fight on the card, this was one of those that was on the card, off the card, on the card again, but it ended up being a catchweight instead of the light heavyweight. It had Quinton Rampage Jackson versus Fabio Maldonado. I might take some slack for this, I might not, but to me, this was like watching an old-timers boxing match. The good parts that I would say is that Rampage surprised me and how he came out in the first round. He definitely mixed it up more, and Rampage was actually using kicks.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and believe it or not, I would have never heard. And this is not just 1-2 kicks. He actually used several kicks, some high, some low, some middle. He mixed up his offense well, and ultimately he kept hitting Maldonado, and Maldonado I think hit himself more than Rampage did. But ultimately, Rampage pulled out a unanimous decision victory. It was lopsided. But you know what? It was a nice way to see Rampage back in action. And I think he's made the transition and accepted the fact that he's more of a company man now than ever will be a title contender.
I think so. And I think that's kind of where Rampage wants to be at this point in his career. He doesn't have a lot to prove. He's pretty much been in every major show and held the belt up. And so, he's 35 years old. He's, I think, 35 professional wins. And so if he wants to be a perennial gatekeeper for that weight class, I can't think of a better guy. He looked faster in his hands. He looked a little leaner than he normally does. It looks like he came in a little leaner than he normally does. He looked faster. And this fight showed us a couple things we never see. We hardly ever see Rampage using knees and kicks, which he used effectively and versatilely. Right. And we never see Fabio Maldonado make a takedown. And as sloppy as you want to say it was, he got him down. It was a push forward.
Second,
it was a push forward trip, and he got him down. Didn't do a hell of a lot when he was on the ground. This ultimately ended up being the Quinton Rampage Jackson show. I mean, by the end of the first round, Maldonado was having trouble seeing out of his right eye. I think it was his right eye, right? Was it the left eye?
The left eye. I think the left eye.
And though the corner did an excellent job of reducing swelling come round 3, that was a real problem. And by the time he got complete, the swelling reduced, Fabio Maldonado was kind of out of it. He never really got aggressive in the third round, rather.
And kept doing this grinding against the cage.
Yeah, I think that he was trying to really.
I couldn't really tell what he was doing. Was he trying to go for a takedown? Was he trying to do dirty boxing?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't. He wasn't throwing enough punches for me to determine if it was dirty boxing. He wasn't putting his hands on Rampage enough to suggest that he wanted to even try the takedown. Right. I really couldn't see what Fabio's offense was, except for the fact that he was trying to coax Jackson into an exchange, and Jackson pretty much stayed in the pocket, had no problems, but still fought a smart fight. But ultimately, like I said, Rampage did what he was supposed to do. And he did try to. He even said it himself in the post fight. He did try to knock him out. Maldonado's just too resilient.
Yeah, Maldonado's got the head of a brick. I don't know if that's quite literal, but he doesn't seem to be the smartest guy either. Rampage did a hell of a job pulling out the W on this end. I mean, Maldonado barely fought back after round 2, and I think he hit himself, like my partner said, more times than than he hit Rampage. So Jackson with the W on this one.
And now on to the main event. It's Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson versus Kyogi Horiguchi. Look, folks, even though I know I called this a jobber fight, I have to retract that because Horiguchi tried his best. He did a great job, but ultimately it was the Demetrius Johnson show. Yeah. It was almost like watching water hit a rock over and over again until finally the water cracks it, and he finds that hole, and where the hole was ultimately in the grapple game. Demetrius was able to take this fight to the ground more than once, and ultimately pulls out a record 4 minutes 59 seconds submission in the 5th round armbar.
That must have hurt like hell.
To retain his belt and also get himself $50,000 richer for a performance of the night bonus. A lot of people did not show up to this card. If you happen to watch on TV, the 2 upper rows in the stadium were all dark lit because they had nobody there. Well, all those people, you guys missed out because this card was awesome. And for the ones that were booing during the fight, you guys need to watch a little bit more mixed martial arts. Or next time, you know what? Give your tickets to the people who didn't show up because they should have showed up instead. They put on a clinic. These guys were trying no matter what from beginning to end. And I know it has to hurt Horiguchi more than anything to have to tap at that one last second. Yeah. But Demetrius did a beautiful job. We did a clinic and listened to his corner, which a lot of fighters don't do.
Right.
He listened to his corner, even with the last few seconds, and he's already unanimously winning this fight and pulled out that beautiful armbar. Way to go, Demetrius.
Yeah. And, not taking anything away from Horiguchi. Horiguchi, I believe, the number 9 ranked contender in his weight class, and Demetrius, obviously, the champ at number 1. And you got kind of what it would look like when the champ faces the number 9 guy.
Number 8.
Excuse me, the number 8 guy, Mr. MMA. I'll stand corrected. Anyway, so I'm not going to take anything away from Horiguchi. He fought a hard fight. He fought a good fight. He fought with his heart. He just got outclassed, and we kind of both knew that he would. And Johnson, Mighty Mouse, walks away with the win.
And also what I liked about Horiguchi, he fought a lot more like the Ian McCall, Demetrius Johnson fight of number 1. Yeah. He fought like he wasn't afraid of the champ. A lot of the other fighters who have faced the champ know because he is so cagey, so cunning, so crafty, so quick. They're more on the defensive of worrying what they might get caught with instead of being more concerned about what can I hit him with.
Right.
And Horiguchi, like I said, he really tried his best. He put in a great effort. And he did some great grappling defense for a wrestler. He did a great job.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Demetrius showed why he's the champion, why he's the top of the food chain, and that $50,000 I know looks a lot better in that bank account.
Yeah, right. Definitely so. And so, how did you guys do? Did you make the right calls? I ended up 5-9, and Mr. MMA also ends up 5-9 today. Why don't you comment, weigh in down there in the section below us, and tell us what you think. Think of the show, think of our cards, and don't forget, Mr. MMA does a live tweet, and he is the moderator of the Weigh-In Facebook page, where it's being updated all of the time. So if you really want to join the conversation or talk directly to Mr. MMA, get in on the tweet, get in on the Facebook page, and let him know in person what you think.
Hit me up.
Yeah, hit him up. And what other ways can they contact you?
You can hit me up on Twitter at Mr. MMA, at Mr. MMA. It's X, lowercase x, uppercase x, 2 underscores, Mr. MMA, all one. But you can find our link definitely on the weigh-in page.
Yeah, absolutely.
But ultimately, Mr. MMA page, the weigh-in page, you post, I respond.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today on the Weigh-In.
Yeah.
See you next time.